Hi everybody, this is Mike. Today we are going to be building our drum kit for the drum kit series that we're building in Unity and VR. So let's get started. I have a few reference photos, so if I just quickly open this document. I've put together a few references, so this is the drum kit we're going with. It's got a nice amount of drums, few toms, snare, bass drum, cymbal and hi-hat. Should be good for us to build inside VR. This is the URL for where I found that, and I've been through and wrote down all the dimensions of each of the drums, so I'll be using this to remind myself, and I've just got a couple of reference pictures of the claw, the bit that is joining onto the drums. Now, these drums are all very similar, so let's get started. I'll just have this on my other screen so I can refer to the dimensions. So if you see me looking over this way, it'll be so I can see the dimensions, but I will walk through everything with you as well. Let me just turn the shortcut keys on and we're ready to start. So we've got a brand new scene in Blender, nothing done yet, so let's save this. I've got a folder called drum kit and let's call it drum kit. Let's delete this cube and we can start with a cylinder. Makes most sense because that's the main shape of a drum, and we're going to increase the number of vertices on this cylinder. I'm just going to double it to 64. I've done a few tests in and out of VR just to see which one looks best, and 64 seems to give the smoothest surfaces without too much cost on vertices. We don't want to have a end cap, so we want this to be empty, and we'll model based on the size of the bass drum, which is 55 centimeters circumference. So radius is half of that, so that's 0.275, and the depth is 40 centimeters. Now I'm going to do this 36 centimeters, and the reason for that is we're going to put a rim around that drum kit, and that rim is going to be 2 centimeters. So 2 centimeters either side gets us to a 40 centimeter drum. So I'm just going to press full stop on the numpad, which zooms us into the view. Now while you're modeling close like this, you might start to notice some clipping on your camera. If you do see that, you can decrease this clip start point. You can start to see here it's clipping and we're unable to actually see what we're modeling. So if we drop this one, now we can see the whole model. That's very useful for when you're modeling smaller objects like this. I'm just going to jump into side mode and select this top edge. So that's just Alt and click on the top edge. I'll use edge select, and first we're going to create a rim. So we're going to go out, up, in and down, and I've done a few measurements on this so I know what to do, and you can just follow along. So we're going to press E for extrude, S for scale, and we need to scale 1, which takes you right up to sort of the edge of where you are, 0.005, and that takes us out 5 millimeters. So that will give us a 5 millimeter rim. Then we need to extrude on the Z axis, and we're going to go up 2 centimeters, so that's 0.02. Let's see if I can minimize this so you can actually see what I'm doing. And then we're going to extrude again, scale, and for this we're going to go 0.98, and that will create us that around about a 1 centimeter lip. And then we're going to extrude on the Z minus 0.01, so that's just moving us down 1 centimeter on the other side of the lip. Press return, and then we're just going to press F, and that will give us a face. So that is the basics of our drum. Let's add a few materials just so we can see distinctions between there. So let's 2 materials. The first one we will call rim. I've got a caps lock on, rim, and the second one we will call skin, and we don't need to worry just yet about the shell of the drum. We'll be modelling that separately. So the rim we'll go with I'll use a black colour, Skin, I'm just going to use a slightly off-white colour, and I might as well set these inside the actual renderer while I'm here. And this face is already selected for us, so let's just select skin in our materials and assign that material, and that will give us the basics of the drum. Now we've only got our rim on one side of this drum, so we need to put a mirror modifier on. So if we go into add modifiers and mirror, and we're mirroring on the Z axis, so now you can see we've got, if you can actually pick that up with these different colours, you can see we've got 2 on there. This is now mirroring like these faces are duplicate on top of each other, so I've just put a loop cut around the middle. I'm just going to jump into this mode, which I'm not actually sure what it calls this, whole screen transparent, and jump into edit mode, deselect all, press B for box select, and I'm just going to select these bottom edges here and delete the vertices. Now that's split our mesh in half, but the mirror modifier is now duplicating that texture, that mesh, sorry, is being repeated down for us. Just get into the actual position that we're in, and we don't actually need this face, but I'm just going to leave it on for now just so we can see for our next bit. So next we're going to build our grip. So if we quickly have a look at one of these grips, it links over the top of the rim to hold the rim down, and then it's got a screw into the shell of the drum, and then that is tightened up to essentially pull down that rim on top. So I'm just going to use that as a reference point. So in top mode, just get the 3D cursor. I'm just going to drop this roughly where we're going to place this object, and we're going to start with a cube. So let's shift A and add in a cube. Scale this down just so we can see it. So I'm just pressing S there and then dragging in, and we'll use the dimensions to do it a bit more precisely. So I want the depth of this object to be around about 1 centimetre. We'll do exactly. So we'll make it 1 centimetre deep and 2 centimetres wide, and I want it to cover the whole of this lip, so we need it to be 2 centimetres tall as well. But because we want a little bit sticking out, I'm going to just increase that by 5 millimeters. And then if we jump into side mode, and I'm just going to align the bottom of this to this rim edge. I'm doing this quite quick just because we've got quite a lot to go through, and it could take us about an hour even at reasonable speed. So if you need to follow along, you'll have to watch this bit back. Once we've done this original modelling bit, the next bit is a lot of repeating, so we should be okay. And if we look at our reference, we can sort of see about halfway down it extrudes out a bit, and that's where we've got our metal bar that pulls down. So I'm just going to press Control R and create a loop cut right in the middle there. And I'm going to use this section here for that bit that was sticking out, and because we don't want the whole thing, I'm just going to press Control R again, and I've just mouse wheeled up, which gives me 2 loop cuts. Scale on the X-axis and just pull these out to round about what looks right. Just going to turn that off, which that looks about right for me, and then we're just going to extrude this out a little bit. Just want to move this face out a bit more. Now you can obviously see it looks very, very square at the minute, and we can add smooth shading on there, and that will help a little bit, but it's still very square. So the next thing we can do is, if we jump into modifiers, and we can add a subdivision surface modifier. Now if you're not aware of what this does, it essentially adds more geometry into your shape, and it rounds off the corners. So where it decides it adds it on, it looks between this edge and this edge, or this edge and this edge, depending on where they are, and we'll try to approximate the geometry to add more detail in. So the closer you have an edge to another edge, the less it will create this sort of curve here. So because this is a bit too much for us, we want this to be a little bit less curved, just a slight curve at the top. And the very simple way of doing this is to use loop cut. So we Control R to put a loop cut in and just move that up to that edge, and you can see, if I zoom in closer, you can see the difference between this curve and this curve. And we'll put another one in on the front over here, and I'm just going to do this around the whole object. So Control R and then move that loop cut out, and that looks fine. And we need some round here, so at the minute this is a bit of a circle, so Control R, put one in here. And this is really just down to practice. Once you've done a few of these, you find it extremely easy, and it creates a much sort of smoother look. So I think we're going to scale these in, so I need to select these. Let me select all these, and I'm going to scale these on the X and just pull these in a little bit. And I'm going to get this face, and I'm going to extrude this in, and that's where the screw is going to come out. And I might add one along this bottom edge as well. And you can adjust these now to wherever you want. So holding Control and Alt and clicking on that will select your edge loop, and you can move these out until you're happy with this shape. So I'm just going to move these a little bit in, and I'm happy with that now. Let's place our 3D cursor in here, and let's add in, I want to do this inside this object. I want to place a 3D cursor. I want to keep all this as one so that we can transform it later on. So let's add in a cylinder, and that will have created a very large cylinder. So let's do that again. Shift A to add in a cylinder, and I'll update the dimensions here. So I'm going to go for about a 5mm circumference, so 0.025. That looks a bit big, so let's go even smaller. 0.01. That looks fine. And length wise, I'm going to go for 5 centimeters. And that's way too many vertices, so let's drop this to 8. And you can see I've still got this big cylinder I added, so let me just press L, delete the vertices, and I must have also had that selected, so let me just deselect that. And this cylinder has not got an end cap on, so we want to put one of those on, so just press F, and you'll see due to that subsurface that it's trying to estimate the faces between this very bottom edge and this top one. So I think this would makes a very great looking pencil, but not such a great screw. So let's just add in a loop cut and drag that up, and you can see we've got this sort of much smoother top now. Press L to select link, and let's move these down. I'm just going to drop into top mode and just estimate this center position. That looks fine. And now the bottom bit, let's have a quick look at that. So the bottom bit that attaches into a shell it's quite square with a slight bend over it, so I think we'll follow roughly the same procedure we did with the top. And I'm going to start it round about there. Shift A, add in a cube and scale that down. And again, due to the subsurface modifier, it's sort of created this shape, so we can add in loop cuts and drag that out. But before we do that, I'm just going to turn the view down to 0, and that will actually let us view what the squares look like. And then I'm just going to size these from here, so I'm just going to do it roughly how I think it needs to look. Probably put this one in line with this, and we're slightly off centered, so let me select linked and eyeball this into place. That looks fine, and it's just looking at the reference photo, it's probably a little bit long. and we don't need this back face. And if I turn this up, you'll notice when we delete this, because it's no longer got that face to go by, this will turn flat and it estimates the next positioning from there. So let me just select this and move it roughly into place. This is a little bit round at the minute, so I'm just going to do our loop cut trick and one round the top. And I actually quite like this sort of curve that we've got. It's similar to this sort of curve that we've got going on here. Now we could go into more detail on these and you could do the screws and everything, but we're just going for a look of a drum kit and I need to fit it inside this tutorial. If you want to, you can go back and do more details on these once you've had a bit more practice, but we're going to get something that looks close. So I think we can call that done. Let's just, I'm just going to now remove this. I was just using this for reference really for where I was placing this object, so I'm just going to delete these edges, delete these vertices, sorry. So now we've got our two objects. We've got our rim, bottom rim, and our grip, let's call it. Now you can obviously, the one problem with this is we need more of them to go around this drum, and you could duplicate this object, move it around to about here, rotate it so it fits on the rim, but that's obviously going to be difficult to eyeball and difficult to adjust later on if you want to do that. So what we can do is use an array modifier. So let's add in an array modifier, and I'm just checking the picture here, and we've got 8, and you can see that that's going across, and no matter how much you move this, it's never going to align with the circle here. So the little trick for doing this one is to use an offset object. So that's an object we're going to set in the middle of this circle, and it will use that to calculate the offset of each of these grips around the center of this. And before we do that, we need to make sure that the position, the rotation position for these is set in the center as well. So when we rotate it, it will rotate around that center position. So to do that, we just space set our origin to the 3D cursor, which currently is not set to 0. We can see that inside this properties panel over here. So 3D cursor 0, 0, 0, and that will put that there. Space set origin to 3D cursor. Now if I rotate this object around the Z axis, you can see it's nicely rotating now around our drum, which is exactly what we want it to do, but we want it to do that for all the other ones as well. So I'm just going to set that back to 0, and we need to have an object that you can use for this offset, and we're just going to use an empty. So if you do Shift A and you've got an empties menu, and this allows you to add a number of different types, we're just going to add in a plane axis, and that's just a point inside this thing now, which has got no mesh data, it's just a point for us to use. So if we select our empty, let's call it rotation, if I can spell correctly, rotation point, just so we don't forget what it is later on. And object offset. Now those will have all disappeared. They've got, in fact, they've gone somewhere. I'm not entirely sure where they've gone, but they've disappeared somewhere, and that's due to this scale. So because this scale's so small, it's gone a long way away. So let's apply our rotation and scale, and you can see they've come back. Set these to 0 and 0. So now we've got 8 objects sat on top of each other, and adjust our rotation, and in our case it's the Z axis. So when you adjust this, you can see now that all these other grips are rotating around this central offset. So we can put those roughly into place, which, if my maths is correct, should be 360 divided by 8, which is 45, and we've got nice even spacing. The next thing we need is to add a mirror modifier onto here, because we want some at the bottom, and mirror on the Z axis. The mirror modifier is again from the origin point, so our origin is in the middle, so when we do a mirror on the z-axis, it mirrors the distance between your origin and your mesh, which allows us to have these nicely placed and in position. So that's everything we need actually. So let's just create a chrome texture for these, and I'll set it to a light grey, and I'll put the metallic up here and the roughness right down, so you can see we've got a more sort of metallic-y look on these. Actually look quite nice. I'm just going to smooth shade, so we've got smooth shading on each of these. So that is our rims, and have we got smooth shading on the rims? It doesn't look like it. So I'm just going to shade that ring and the internal ring as well. So that is our rims, and that is our grips. The next thing to build is the shells of each of the drums, and we want to reuse all these lips and grips. We don't want to do this over and over again, so we're going to duplicate these objects. So let's call this rims and this grips, and we'll use this collection system. So if not used this before, it's a layer system. It's similar to what you might use inside Unity. It's not quite as good as Unity's yet. Like when you select objects, it doesn't like jump to that object like you would expect in Unity. Once you get a lot of collections, it still becomes difficult to find them, but they are useful for things like this. So we're going to do a new collection, and I'm just going to call this backup rims and grips, and we'll keep this one where we don't apply any of the modifiers or anything like that. So we've selected these two objects, press M, and that allows you to move these objects. So M to move into the collection and the backup rims, and you can see that now has jumped up into this collection, which we can hide from the view or hide from the render, and it does all the child objects as well, which is very useful when you're creating multiple objects. And we can also now duplicate, so let's duplicate that collection and call this bass drum, not brum, bass drum. And we need to add in a new object now, which is going to be our shell. So if we add in a new mesh and a cylinder, you can see we've got our old dimensions. So let's put this back up to 64 vertices, and let me just check the dimensions. It was a 55 centimeter circumference, 0.275, and that's annoying. I'll type the depth in here, and the depth was 40 centimeters, and we need to minus the 2 centimeters for the top rim and 2 centimeters for the bottom rim, so that takes us to 0.36, and that should align perfectly because this is the one that we based it on. So we're just going to add shade smooth onto that object, and let's create a texture for it called shell, and we'll use, these drums actually come in a lot of different colours. I'm just going to use this sort of blue colour. Beautiful. So that is our bass drum done. Let's call that shell, and let's hide these objects. Let's duplicate that collection, and next we will do our floor tom. If no one's aware of what these are actually called, then this is the bass drum, this is a tom, and because it's on the floor it's called a floor tom. These two are also toms, but because they're on a rack they're called rack toms. This is a snare drum, this is a cymbal, and this is a hi-hat, and this is what we're going to be working on. So when I'm talking about those drums, they're the ones that I mean. The floor tom, we can use this. Let me hide the bass drum away. The shell, we can use this one, and this floor tom is 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters. So change this to 0.04, 0.04. Oops, 0.4, sorry. And the height is actually the same, so we should be nicely in position here. So all we need to do now is scale these objects, and the reasoning why I've done this, just so you're aware, is we could just scale down this whole object until it fits, but you'll notice that the the thickness of the rim changes, and the thickness of the rim I want to remain 2 centimeters on every object. So we can't just scale the entire object. We can only scale sort of inwards. We can't scale vertically, which is why I've left this as a separate object, and then we're bringing this in for every drum. But what we can change is the dimension of here, which is floor tom is 0.4, so 0.4, 0.4, and that will have matched that up. I must have accidentally done something with this scaling now, so let me just quickly undo that because there we go. And this is 0.4, 0.4. This drum is 0.4, 0.4. Yeah, so I messed up the scaling. And that is our floor tom. Now we need to move these, and let me just quickly check the floor tom. Let me bring over what I'm looking at. I'm just seeing how many of these grips it's got on. So I know there's 8 on this bass drum, but I'm pretty sure that looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's only 6 on here, so we need to reduce the number of these grips for this object. So to adjust these into place, we're going to jump into top down mode, press tab to enter edit, and we've got this, and all we're going to do is move this on top of the rim. Now you could go like this and move this in, but you're going to end up getting stuck. So just up here you can change this to local, and that will take into account the rotation of this object, and now we can just bring that in. So I'm just going to zoom in and roughly use a couple of these lines to position this in place. I'm just going to press free and make sure that the bottom of this lines up with there, which it does, and let's reduce the number. So if we go into our array modifier and we drop this count down, you can see that obviously the rotation is not correct, and again, if my math is correct, 360 divided by 6 should be 60. And there we've got very nice even spacing, so we've got quite a nice looking floor tom going on there. So let's press Ctrl and S. I actually built this drum kit once before, started to model out all the hardware, and then Blender crashed and I realised I hadn't saved it for about 2 hours, and I didn't have an auto save either, so I had to do the whole thing again. So that's why I can go through this quite quickly, because I've done it a couple of times. Let's right click on the floor tom and let's duplicate, hide the floor tom, and this one we will do the first rack tom, so let's call this rack tom large, and this shell is rack tom large. It's 30 centimeters, 0.3, 0.3, and it is 23 centimeters high. Take off the 4, so that's 19 centimeters. The 4 again is the 2 centimeters for the top and the bottom rim. And we now want to make sure that this, so you need to do this in edit mode, we need to put this on there, and the reason why we have to do it in edit mode is if we do it in this mode, the bottom one will also move at the same time, whereas if you're in edit mode you can see they both move. Now you can eyeball this if you want and get it pretty close, but the best way of doing that is to look at the height of this object, which is 19 millimeters, half of that, which is 9.5, and then half of this 2, which is 1, is 10 centimeters and 5 millimeters. So we can position this at 0.0105, and that let's position that exactly in line with the top. Hopefully that made sense. We can we'll be doing it a couple more times, so we'll go over it again. 0.3, 0.3, and let's do the same for these again. So look up at the top, edit mode, just zoom in so we can see where we're placing it, and just move that in till it's roughly, I'm just doing it roughly halfway on this object, and then drag it down until this bottom edge here is in line with the rim. So that is the rack tom large completed. Save that and let's duplicate that collection again, and let's do rack tom small and hide these away. And the rack tom small is 25 centimeters by 20 centimeters, so 0.25, 0.25, and 0.16. You'll have likely just seen me fade in and out there, and that's because my daughter came downstairs. She was creeping as quietly as she possibly could, and had to pause the video so she could get out of the house. Where were we? So we've just done these dimensions, 0.16, and we need to do this rim. So this is, lost my document now. Rack tom small is 25 centimeters. So 0.25, 0.25, and the height we can't do in there. So let's jump into edit mode, and this is 16 centimeters high. So we know it's 8 centimeters to there and 1 more, so 9 centimeters up, and this center point of here will be in the right place. So move this to 0.9. Nope, I was right, 0.09. Yeah, so that's 9 centimeters. Edit these. Let's move that in so it's in about the center. Press 3 to go into right orthographic. Move this down so it's just in line. And that is our rack tom small done. Let's hide that away. And next is our snare drum. And the snare drum is 0.35, and 14 centimeters minus the 4 for the rims is 10 centimeters. 0.35. And let's jump into side mode. I keep forgetting these numbers, so 10 centimeters, 5, 6. So 0.06. Zoom in and just let's put this roughly in place. Orthographic mode, and move this. Oops, I need to be in edit mode. Move this roughly in line. There we go. Now this is going to be down to personal preference. If we look at the snare drum, you can see it's actually connected by one piece, as opposed to like 2 separate pieces down here, and it's up to you whether you go into that or you leave it like this. I've done this before and I quite like the look of just connecting this metal bar up, so I'm just going to delete these vertices and extend this bar down to the bottom. So if I select this edge loop and we move that down, and you can see we're actually going on top or in line with the other faces when we come down here, which would mean we'd have duplicate faces on top of each other. So to stop that, if you open your mirror modifier and you select and you turn on clipping, that means any vertices that start to touch it will clip those vertices together. So you'll see that now when I drag this down, it stops there and I can't go any further, and it's just putting those vertices together. So I actually prefer that look on my snare drum. You can leave yours however you want. So that's the snare drum, that's all our drums done. So next we've got 2 cymbals to make. So let's add in a circle. We're going to use the same amount of vertices, 64, and the cymbal is a 40 centimeter circumference, so 0.2 on the radius, and that should have created it somewhere. Where's it gone? Oh, I created it inside. I've created it inside of one of my hidden collections. So there we go, that is our cymbal. Now I've jumped into edit mode there and selected this edge loop, and I'm just going to extrude this and scale this down into the center. I've tried to do this symbol a number of ways, and this seems to be the best way that I've found to do it. So in edit mode, I'm going to press Ctrl R and adding a number of loop cuts, and we're just going to use these to create that sort of rise in the center of a symbol. So I want the rise to start around about here, come up, and then sort of loop into the middle. And to do that, if I'm just going to switch into wireframe mode so we can do it, we could go around and we could select each of these and we could move it up into a position that looks about right, and we could just sort of continue that process until we're happy with the shape. But we can also use proportional editing, which is well, I'll have to show you because it's quite hard to describe. So this button here allows you to turn on proportional editing, and this one determines the sort of shape that it uses. So if we turn on random and we press S and we scale that in and out, you can see it's randomly changing the scale of all the connected vertices within a circle of effect. Now that circle is quite large at the minute, so we can't actually see it. So using the mouse wheel, you can see this circle on your screen, and now anything within that circle will be affected by this randomness, and the closer it is to the edge, the less it is affected by it, which gives you sort of a proportional editing. So we obviously don't want to do that, but we want to use smooth. I just use that to be able to show you, and we don't want to scale, we want to move this up. So if we move up, now you can see all the other parts are sort of moving proportionally to how much we're moving this center ring, and we can adjust this circle so it only affects the amount that we want it to affect. So I'm going to have it round about there, I think, and I'm going to do that once, and then I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to include slightly less of the rings this time, and that's just to create a bit more of a bell shape. The other thing is the symbol doesn't go perfectly flat after that point, it actually bends down a little bit. So I'm just going to create another loop cut inside here, and we're going to select our edge and move that down slightly, and this one we're going to move down slightly, so it will create a more of a drop off. It's quite difficult to see. If I go into side mode, you can see we've now got this sort of drop off and then up into this bell curve, and you can adjust these as many times as you want until you get that sort of look and feel that you're going for. So I'm just going to add smooth shading onto these as well, because it's a symbol and we want it to be smooth. Let's create a material, call that symbol, and we'll go for a yellowy sort of colour. We'll be creating the materials for this inside Unity, so we won't actually be baking out any textures in this version. So we have our symbol now, but if we look underneath and we turn on backface culling, you'll be able to see, you can see straight through the bottom of this symbol. That is obviously no good for when we're in Unity, or we won't be able to see underneath. So what we want to do on here is add some thickness. So if we jump into our modifiers and we add a solidify modifier, that applies thickness to our into our model, including which gives us a backside to the symbol. Obviously that's a bit thick, so I think we'll go for 1mm, should be enough. And yeah, that looks fine, so we don't need any more than that. And we need one more symbol, which is our hi-hat. We're only going to do one symbol for the hi-hat, and then in Unity we'll flip it upside down and that will create the hi-hat. The hi-hat is a slightly different dimension, so let's call this symbol so we don't forget, and let's duplicate that, hide that one away, and press N to bring up the properties panel. And this is 35 centimeters, so 0.35, and that's it essentially. No more difficult than that. and we now have our two cymbals, big cymbal and a hi-hat cymbal. That's everything we're going to cover inside this video. So we've built all our drums, we've got everything ready to go. What we need to do now is put these drums into position and create all the connections and all the stands, which we'll do in a separate hardware video, and once we're at that point we'll be able to export into Unity. So like, comment, subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.